What's up, Misfits? In today's video, we're walking through ways to streamline your decision-making process in Call of Duty Warzone. The faster and more accurate decisions that you make, the better you're going to fare in Verdansk. So stick around as we explore how to speed up that decision-making process. Welcome back to the channel. Maverick here, and I've got another Call of Duty Warzone Strategy video for you. Today we're going to be talking about decision-making theory, and we're going to be walking through strategies to streamline your decision-making process. A really important concept when it comes to decision-making in Warzone can be illustrated by this graphic. Decisions rest on two planes. There's the accuracy of the decision and the speed of the decision. A perfect decision would be super fast and perfectly accurate, while a terrible decision would be really slow to make and completely inaccurate. Your goal should be to try and make fast and accurate decisions. Now, of the two planes, speed is really the only one that you can, for lack of a better term, hack. Initiate hack. Your skill with making accurate decisions is really something that's built from playing the game consistently for a long period of time and encountering a wide variety of situations and decisions over and over again. On the other hand, speed is based on how long it takes for your brain to process the available options and then choose which one you want to execute. The way you hack this is by creating a process or a framework that you'll always have an answer ready for. Here's a super simple example. In every game, you're going to choose a loadout. Most people will have a couple of options that they always choose from. Mine, for example, I have a Ghost AR class, a Ghost SMG class, an Overkill Sniper class, and then what I'd consider kind of the meta class, which right now is a Bruin and an MP5. If I know that those are the four options that I'll almost always choose, I should put those in spots that are very easy for me to remember on my loadout decision. So my AR class is spot number 1. My SMG class is spot number 2. My next recommendation for people would be to make spot 10 and spot 9 as the other two classes for the creative class. These are the spots that require the least amount of buttons or movement to access, so just speeds things up a little bit more. I always choose an Overkill class when I call my own loadout in. And then I choose a Ghost class 99% of the time when I'm picking up the map-provided loadout. So if I know this, and I know which loadout or which creative class spots I've listed these items, then I shouldn't have a thought process for figuring out where and what to choose. Knowing this and knowing which spots I'm going to choose my loadout from make my trips to the death trap that is the big white box of loadouts as fast as possible. I rarely die at a loadout anymore because the only way that I do die is if someone was camping a loadout with a sniper and they headshot me. And the reality, folks, is there's nothing you could have done about that either way, so don't sweat it. So here's the real question. How many decisions can we hack in a game? How many decisions can we speed up? If we gain a half second on our opponents with each decision that we make, in 10 decisions, we've got a 5-second advantage on our enemy. That's a big deal. That can be the difference between catching an enemy in cover or catching an enemy out in the open in the middle of a rotation. So let's break down a list of the most common decisions that you'll face while you're patrolling the streets of Verdansk. Here's a list of 20 decisions that I think you'll face in the average Warzone match. This is not comprehensive. You'll have some other things that you encounter, but this is a really good start for people that are just getting used to this theory. I'm not going to read them all to you, so if you just want to take a second and go ahead and pause, feel free to peruse the list. I'll give everybody a moment now. All right, now that we've seen the list, let's go ahead and divide these decisions into two categories. There are decisions that are dependent on game-specific information. You can't know where your enemies are or where's the best final position until you've actually got that information from being in the match. There are also decisions that don't need any game information. I don't need game information to choose what loadout I'm gonna have. I don't need game information to know the sequence for which I'm gonna buy things at a buy station or how I'm gonna spend my money. So we have two types of decisions. Decisions that are game dependent and decisions that are game independent. What we want to do is create a streamlined process to make all of the decisions that are independent of the game as fast as we possibly can. So let's sort this list real quick. Okay, now we need to recognize that there are three distinct game phases, and dependent on the game phase that we're in, we're going to behave a little bit differently. Here are my top priorities for each game phase. If I'm in the early game, I'm primarily focused on 1, getting my loadout, and 2, gaining some in-game confidence. If I'm in the mid-game, I'm focused on intelligent rotations and then getting a sense of what the game flow is like. Finally, in the in-game, I'm completely focused on finding the best possible position for the final zone and locating my enemies. Now, during all of these game phases, I'm going to have to worry about my gun and shooting people, but that perpetually exists in the game. Let's take a look at decisions that you're going to make in the early game and what ones we can hack. So, here are these decisions. Where do I drop? How do I get money? What loadout do I choose? Where do I call in my loadout? How should I play this zone? Where are my enemies? How do I spend the money that I have? Am I missing any type of utility? Of these decisions, 5 of them can be made before you ever step into the lobby. Here's how I make the decisions. Now, slight disclaimer. You don't have to make the decisions the way that I make the decision. You just need to have a process for how you make decisions. And remember, the whole focus is speeding things up. Use the process I give you as a way to build your own. Use it as ideas or kind of incorporate the strategies for yourself. First, my go-to drop location is downtown, but I have a specific drop location in every quadrant of Verdansk, depending on where the circle is. So I know, no matter what, that if the circle's in this position, I'm going to Quarry. If the circle's in this position, I'm going here. If it's down there, or wherever it might be, I don't have to think about where I'm going. I've already made those decisions. You're not sure what I'm talking about? I've got a whole series on drop locations for player types as well as loadouts, so go ahead and make sure you check that out. Loadout choice is easy for me. It's always my overkill class. If I'm calling in the loadout myself, if I'm getting the in-game loadout, it's 99% of the time my Ghost AR class. I also always call my loadout in on a roof next to the buy station that I'm near. I don't ever just drop it randomly next to a buy station to attract attention. I have designated spots, which I'll show you real quick. And I call the loadout in these locations. It's more protected and I have a little bit more control over the environment. In the first zone, from a playstyle perspective, I'm only focused on getting my loadout and then securing a couple of kills to get confidence. I treat the first zone as kind of like my warm-up, trying to get my aim dialed in, get my movement comfortable, get the slide cancel process, up to speed. It's just getting settled into the match. Lastly, for the early game, I always spend my money in the same order. First, my loadout. Second, my gas mask. Third, the UAV. Fourth, self-revive. And fifth, if I have enough money, grab a cluster strike. This is a list that I work my way down, so I always know what's the next thing that I have to check off. So I don't spend time looking at the buy station, figuring out, oh, what should I do next or whatnot. Very simple. Do I have a gas mask? No, click. Do I have a UAV? No, click. Just making it really easy so that my brain doesn't have to focus on anything other than what are the noises around me and the enemies that I can eliminate. Now, this is something that's important to understand. By making these processes before I ever jump into the match, I've taken a list of 8 decisions that I have to make throughout the battlefield in the early game and reduced it down to now I only have to make 3. I've already made 5 of them. All my enemies, they still have 8 decisions to make. It's a lot easier for me to focus on only making 3 as opposed to having to get through all 8. If I'm going up against an enemy that doesn't use this process, or somebody that's focused on one of the multitude of decisions that they have to do, I'm going to gain an advantage. My goal is that by the time I get to the end game, I really only want to focus on 2 things. Where are my enemies and my aim? I want to get everything else that I'd have to focus on throughout a match out of the way as soon as possible. So the early game for me really just feels like checking boxes. It doesn't require a lot of complex thinking. As the first circle starts to close, we're going to start moving into more complicated situations that I think the mid game is really the most labor intensive part of any given match. It requires a much higher level of focus. The mid game is going to be focused around recognizing rotations, getting a feel for the game flow, and locating where the final POI is going to be. There are 12 decisions on our list that you can find yourself facing throughout the mid game. Of the 12 decisions, you can answer 5 before the game starts. I won't know where to rotate until the match has provided that information for me. But I can create systems for how and when I rotate. I don't need to know any of the game information. Here's kind of an example for me. I will always immediately rotate if I have a long rotation, as soon as the first zone ends. Most players can share stories of dying when they're trapped between the edge of the zone and somebody that got there before them and were gatekeeping, and they just smashed in between them. You know who you are. We've all been there. If you think about your normal gameplay, it's pretty common to take a second and look back towards a closing zone and try to catch any late rotators. They're easy kills. What you'll also realize, if you examine your own gameplay, is that you don't often look to the edge of the zone or look back at the gas until you start to realize that zone's almost closed. We'll call it a minute left until it's finished. And definitely when the announcer starts pinging that buzzer that we've got 10 seconds left before zone closure. People will typically spend the beginning to mid time of any given zone finishing up looting or grabbing some more utility or finishing any sort of skirmish that they were involved in. By early rotating on long rotations, I don't put myself in a position to fight a two-front war where I have to battle against the zone at my back and people in front of me. If you're a newer player and you're looking to get your first win or just live a little bit longer in the mid game, that's a period where you find yourself dying pretty often, this can be a pretty key part to your decision making process. Rotate early and rotate aggressively rather than spend your time sneaking around the edge of the zone. In terms of how I rotate, I hate cars. Too loud, die too easily. There's no way to defend yourself when you're in one. I don't like them. And solos, I think they're a terrible idea. I rotate exclusively on these feet. So get yourself a good pair of boots and walk. I know what utility I use, and I don't frequently visit buy stations in the mid game. I'll really only bounce over to one if it's in line with my rotation and I can chain UAVs together. So think of, I've got 15 grand and I can pop up an advanced UAV and then put a UAV in my pocket. If you have a heartbeat sensor, don't really need a UAV in the mid game. I really only use a UAV in the mid game to help provide information for some sort of complex rotation I have to go through. Think of rotations where there are a lot of buildings and then open area. So coming out of quarry, crossing from downtown to hospital, places like that. The only other time I'm using a UAV in the mid game is if I've decided that I want to hunt and I'm just rushing down red dot. Otherwise, the mid game really encompasses way too large of a portion of the map that by the time any of the information you gained from popping a UAV becomes useful towards the end game, people have probably moved. So you've used a tool without any real payoff for it. So I think you're better off holding on to one of those until you get closer to the end game, the final zone. The mid game involves, I'd say, the most distractions for players. And it's a period of time where you've got the highest demand on your focus and your attention and sort of your cognitive process, right? It's when your brain's doing the most work on the greatest number of things. As you work through the end game, though, all the information you're gaining, you're storing and you're using to help develop your strategy for the end game so that you don't have to focus on any of these pieces during the end game. So let's talk about as I make the transition to the end game, I've made the decisions on the weapons and the utility that I'm going to use. No longer do I let any of that become a distraction, or do I let any of that become something I make a decision about. I have the guns I'm finishing the game with, and if I don't have something that I need from a buy station, with one exception, a gas mask, I'm not visiting a buy station. I'm wholly dedicated to locating the best position I can find for the final couple of zones and tracking my enemy. You'll notice I use the term tracking. Didn't say killing. We're going to be doing some of that. If you've ever watched any of my previous Warzone tips videos, you'll know that I think that trigger discipline is one of the most important skills to develop when you're playing a battle royale. And poor trigger discipline is one of the leading causes of death for average to above average players. Knowing when to shoot and when to hold off is one of the most important skills that a player can develop. I've spent my entire time trying to get to this point in the end game. I don't want to give up any advantage I have by giving information to my enemies. So here's the moral of the story. Take the list of potential decisions that I've given you. Look through all the decisions you can make throughout a match, and for as many as you can, create some sort of structure or some sort of automatic answer so that you're not focused on them throughout your gameplay. This won't be done overnight. It's going to require practice. It's going to require repetition. But the more matches that you drop in with this mindset, the faster your decision making will be, and the more focused you can be on the things that matter in the match that result in life or death. Each half second or percentage of focus that you gain over your competition gives you a higher chance of winning those engagements. While Vin Diesel might say,
ask any racer, any real racer. It don't matter if you win by an inch or a mile. Winning's winning.
Winning is winning, but it's a lot better to win easy than it is to win hard. So you need to remove as many distractions from your gunplay and enemy tracking as possible. By the time you get to the end of the game, you only want to be focused on eliminating every player that crosses your path. The only way to accomplish this is to check every box off for every other decision that you have to make throughout the match. The faster you do it, the better. Well, there we have it, guys. There's another Beginner Warzone Strategy video to help you improve your decision-making process in Verdansk. If you've enjoyed the content, do me a favor, click like, subscribe. All the feedback is much appreciated, and any love that you can throw me is fuel for the fire to keep doing this. So thank you very much for taking some time and hanging out with me. And to all my misfits out there, take care.